Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to use the IR service with the Quantum platform, so let's get started. The infrared service is a collection of IR codes that can be utilized with its corresponding service object in the app builder to send specific codes out of an IR emitter in order to control countless IR devices like TVs, media centers, AC units, and much more with the Quantum platform. Instead of having to scour the internet for specific IR codes that many manufacturers neglect to release to the public or spend the money on an IR hex code reader, the service stores IR codes from a variety of sources, including IRDB, one of the largest crowdsourced, manufacturer-independent databases of infrared remote control codes on the web. I'll provide a link to their GitHub in the description below. We'll start by connecting a simple IR emitter to one builder base and a push button to another. I'll be following this schematic here. So here's the IR emitter. This one comes with the component kit, which we sell on our website. I'll have a link for it in the video description below. As you can see, it's just one emitter onto a PCB with a 10K resistor and 3 pin headers, one for the signal, one for 5 volts, and one for ground. So let's go ahead and take this and connect it to our builder base here. What we'll need are 3 male to female jumper wires that will connect from the pin headers to the terminals on the builder base. We'll start with the signal pin on the very left here. I'm going to take this orange male to female jumper wire and then connect it to the signal pin, and then I'll connect that to GP0 on the builder base. And then next I will bring in this red male to female jumper wire and connect that to the 5 volt pin on the IR emitter here. And then I'll connect that to the 5 volt terminal on the builder base. And then lastly, I'll bring in a black male to female jumper wire, connect that to the ground pin header, and then connect that to the ground terminal on the builder base. All right, there we go. Now we have connected our IR emitter to our builder base. Next, for this video, I'll be creating a simple push button that we'll be using to send the IR hex codes from our system out the IR emitter. That way we can control an IR device from a physical push button as well as an interface button on our computer or smart device. So I'll put this off to the side. I'll bring in a little breadboard here. I have a little push button right here, and then I'll connect that to the breadboard like this. And then I'll bring in my builder base. And then we'll be using 2 male to male jumper wires. One's going to be a little bit longer than the other. I'm going to connect one from the bottom left pin of my push button, and then I'll connect that to GP0 on my builder base. And since I want this push button to be a pull down circuit, I'm going to take this other male to male jumper wire and I'm going to connect the top right pin of my push button. And then I'm going to connect that to 3.3 volts on my builder base. Now we have our push button circuit created. We have our IR emitter circuit created. Let's go ahead and power both of our builder bases on. Then we'll go to the Q server and do the rest of the setup. Now that we're on the home screen of the Q server, let's start by pairing the 2 builder bases. Go over to the Clients tab, then go to the Unpaired tab. Now you should see both builder bases appear if they're both powered on. We'll pick one of them, go to Actions, and then select Pair. Once that first client is paired, we'll go ahead and just click Close, not Setup, and then we'll go to Actions for the second builder base and then select Pair. Once the second client is paired, we'll close that one as well. We'll go back to the Paired tab. Now, I just happen to know that this builder base here is my IR emitter. If you don't know which one is which, what you can do is pick one of the builder bases, go to Actions, and then click Identify. And then you'll see your builder base that's tied to that ID number flash red and green. Once you have figured out which builder bases are which, we'll go to the one that's connected to the IR emitter. We'll go to Actions, select Edit, and then we'll give it a name. I'll name it IR emitter. And then for the location, you can pick any location or make one. I'll do office and then click Save. Now I'll go to the second builder base. We'll go to Actions. I'll select Edit, and then I'll give this one a name. I'll name it Push Button. And then for the location, I'll also choose Office and then click Save. Once you have paired both builder bases, let's go ahead and create the firmware for each of them. We'll go to the Firmware tab. We'll click Create New, and then we'll give it the first file name. I'll name this one IR emitter, and then click Create. Now go to Add Hardware, and then we're going to search for the IR emitter hardware. Click it, and then give it a name. I'm just going to keep it as IR emitter, and then click Add Hardware. Now select the dropdown for it. For the driver, it'll be IR emitter. For the pin, I have the signal pin connected to GP0 on that builder base, so I'll select GP0 and then click Save. Once I've created the IR emitter firmware file, I'm going to go to Actions, Upload, and then for the client, I'm going to select the IR emitter client and then click Upload. Now while that one's uploading, we'll go and create the push button firmware. So we'll click Create New. We'll give this one a name. I'll name it Push Button, and then click Create, and then we'll add the hardware. Now for this hardware, I'm just going to include a button. I'll name it Push Button, and then we'll add that hardware to the file. Now for the driver, I'm going to select GPIO, and then for the pin, I connected it to GP0, so I'm going to select that one. For debounce, I'm going to select Enabled. And then for the pin mode, I connected the one corner to 3.3 volts on the builder base, which is a pull down circuit. So I'm going to select Input Pull Down and then click Save. Now I'll go ahead and upload that to the push button client. I'll go to Upload and then select that push button client there and then click Upload. So while that's uploading, let's do the next step, which is to go to the library and then install the infrared service and then get it running, and then we can go and create the app. So I'll quit out of the notifications. We'll go to the library tab, and then we'll go to services, and then go to the one that says infrared and click download. Once it says that it's installed, we'll go to the services tab. You'll see the infrared service appear. We'll go to actions and then click start. Once it says your infrared service is all set up, we'll click activate. And now that it's running, we can go ahead and create the application. So we'll go over to the apps tab, click create new. Now let's name this app. I'm going to name it infrared service and then click create. Now that I'm on the canvas, the first object I want to bring in is, of course, the infrared service object. So we'll bring it into here. Let's zoom out a little bit. And then the next object will be the initial trigger code object. Drag it out to here and then connected that to the load brands port of the infrared service object. Now what this will do is as soon as I run the application, this is going to trigger the infrared service to load the IR database so you can configure to figure out what IR hex code you will want it to perform. So there we go. Next, we'll bring in 4 drop-down interface objects, one for each of the configuration arrays that we'll be doing. There's brands, devices, configs, and actions. And then now that we have the drop-down menus here, let's start by labeling these. So this first drop-down menu is going to be for this brands port here. So we'll name this one brands, and then we'll also label the dashboard for this one brands as well, and click Save Properties. And then for the next one, it'll be devices. So we'll name it devices. This one will be configs. So we'll name it configs, save properties. And then lastly, we'll name this one actions and then save property. Now let's connect the infrared service object to those drop-down interface objects. So brands here will go to the array port of the brands dropdown. The devices port will go to the array port of the devices dropdown, configs to the configs dropdown, and then actions to the actions dropdown. Okay, so now what's happening here is once this initial trigger triggers the infrared service object, it's going to allow you to configure the different brands, devices, configs, and actions in order to figure out which hex code you want to use. And we're going to have to send that message back into the infrared service. So what we'll be doing is we'll connect the brand's value out port here, and we're going to connect that to the brand import of the infrared service object. And then we'll organize it a little bit better. That way we can see what's going on here. And then we'll also be doing this to the device's value port here. We'll connect it to device. We'll rearrange this a little bit better as well. And then let's do the configs one. And then lastly, the actions. Okay, so the next thing we need to bring in is a static string code object. And we'll put it right over here. And then we're going to connect the code out port of the infrared service object to the string port of that static string object. Now what this is going to do is store that IR hex code that we configure using the dropdowns, and then it won't set it out to the IR emitter until it's triggered. Next, let's bring in our two trigger devices. We're going to have the physical push button. So we'll search for that one, and it'll be the button hardware object. So we'll bring it out. And then the second one is going to be the button interface object. So we'll bring that one out too. And we're going to connect both of their out ports to the trigger port of the static string object, just like that. And now let's name both objects. For the hardware button, we'll name push button, and then click Save Properties. And then for the interface button, we'll also do the same. Lastly, let's bring in our IR emitter hardware object. So we'll search for that. We'll bring it out, and then we'll connect the string out port of the static string code object to that IR emitter. And then we'll also name that object to IR emitter. And then click Save Properties. So now we have just created our application for the infrared service object. What is happening is once I run this application, that initial trigger is going to load the brands to the drop-down interface objects here on the dashboard. And from there, I'll be able to select what brand is the IR device that I want to control, the specific device under that brand that I want to control, the configuration for it, and then ultimately what action I want it to perform. And once I have selected all four of those configurations on the dashboard, it will send that information back into the infrared service object, and then it will send that code out to the static string object, and it will stay there until I push either the physical button or the interface button on my dashboard, and then I'll send it out to the IR emitter. Now to see this in action, we'll do a little demo where I will do the configuration for this to control my Samsung TV. And just to see how that works a little bit better, I'll also be bringing in a text interface object here. And then I'll be connecting the string out port of that static string object to the in port of the text interface object. And I'll give this object a name. I'll name it IR code, and then also label it IR code for the dashboard, and then click Save Properties. Now I'm going to go to Save the App, and then return to my apps, and then I'm going to run this application. We'll be mapping both the push button and IR emitter hardware objects to the correct client and firmware file on that client. So for the IR emitter client with the IR emitter firmware file, I'll select that one. And then for the button, it'll be the push button client with the push button firmware file. And then we'll click Save and Run. Now when I go to my dashboard, we'll go to that application. Now you can see the four drop-down interface objects, one for brands, devices, configs, actions. Here is the button interface object to trigger the static string object to send out the IR hex code. And then here's also where the IR hex code will appear because we included that interface text object. So since I want to use this to control my Samsung TV, First thing I need to do is select the brand. The brand is going to be a Samsung TV. I can scroll through this large list of different brands we have in the database, or you can just type it in. You'll select it. Now for under that brand, I'm going to pick the device that I want to control. This is going to be a TV, so I'll select that one. Configuration will be 7.7. And then for the action, if you scroll through it, you can do a lot of different things. It can press a certain number, adjust the volume, input source, channels, menu, and so forth. It's pretty customizable on what you want it to do. For this, I just want it to simply turn on my TV. So I'll just select power. So once I've done that, it has sent my configuration back to the infrared service object already and has already stored that specific IR hex code into the static string. Now when I push this interface button, we'll be able to see that IR hex code appear in here. So when I do that, there we go. Now you can see the hex code is right here. So now that we have shown that the IR hex code is now sent out when we push that button, let's go ahead and take the push button and the IR emitter to my TV, and then we'll turn it on and off using both the interface button and the physical button. So here we are in my living room where my TV is that we'll be controlling using the IR emitter and the infrared service. So here is the physical push button circuit that we wired up earlier. It's all powered on using the 5-volt power supply DIY kit. We're doing this just to show the true wireless capability of the Quantum platform. Here you can also see the IR emitter with its own power supply DIY kit there. And then we'll also be controlling this TV with this button and then also through the dashboard using that interface button object, and I'll be controlling it with my phone as well as my computer here. So as you can see, the application is running on here. If I go to the dashboard, I've already done the configuration. The brand is Samsung. The device is a TV. The configuration is 7.7, and since I wanted to turn on and off, I have selected power. So now when I push one of these buttons, we'll see the TV turn on and off. So let's start with the physical push button. What I'll do is push that button right here. When we do that, we'll see the TV is turning on. So now that the TV is on, let's go ahead and power it back off using my phone here. And I'm just going to push that interface button and we'll see that the TV turns off. Now lastly, let's go ahead and turn it back on by using the computer. So I'll go ahead and just click that push button and now the TV turns back on. So that's how you use the infrared service with the Quantum platform to control an IR device like your TV. Make sure you check out the links in the video description below for more information about the infrared service and what we went through in the video. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.